Okay, and we're back with another podcast with Gabriel L. And tonight we'll be discussing The Boys.
We can't just kill everyone.
That's exactly what we're gonna do.
Oh, great. Cool. Totally.
1, 2, 3, hit it!
I need some power!
Power! 1, 2, 3.
I'm Superman!
We just need to keep our together a little bit longer.
All right, so The Boys, there's currently 3 seasons of the show that are out currently. They're all completed. And I just wanted to discuss the show. I think we did a preliminary podcast that we never released about The Boys right when I was getting started with the podcasting. And there were some technical difficulties with that podcast and we never released it. So this podcast, it's better to do them, I think, when each season comes out so they're fresh in your mind, because I think what often happens with either a show or a movie is like, even if like it starts out good, your perception of the whole show is often compiled by, you know, what the show does as it progresses, and even sometimes just by how it ends. So I think even though we're going to be discussing all 3 seasons of The Boys, our feelings towards the show may be more based on what we saw over the entirety of it, or even more so over the 3rd episode. So I guess the first question for you will be, do you notice that in movies that you could have a really great movie with a poor ending might taint the whole movie experience for you?
Absolutely, and films often do fall apart in the 3rd act, which is really where it's supposed to be the strongest. They say, you got to finish strong, and that's true of storytelling and sports events, real life scenarios. So yeah, definitely the way something ends does have an impact. Although with some things it didn't bother me quite as much. For example, when it comes to Game of Thrones, they had so many good seasons out that even when the last season was really, really bad, I was still happy that I'd watched the other ones. For many fans, they were turned off because they'd been with the show for so long, and they were really just expecting it to wrap up as brilliantly as it had gone on for so many years. So I could definitely see how that would be disappointing, but at the same time, these days I take what I can get when it comes to good media, even if it's just bits and pieces.
Right. A show that had a very controversial ending was also How I Met Your Mother. Have you ever seen that show?
I've seen a couple of episodes, yes.
So I believe I watched all of it, and I actually enjoyed how it wrapped up, but maybe that was just the cynical side of me being like, I'm done with, however many seasons, the never ending story of how he met his children's mother. So I was just like, okay, I'm glad they finished it up, and they finished it up in a way that kind of maybe hurt the reputation of one of the characters. And I'm like, hey, I don't care. I don't have to see any of these characters as perfect. Either way, getting back to The Boys, The Boys, the first season was different. Once again, spoiler alert, we're basically discussing what we thought about the show. So we're going to talk about the things that happened in the show. So if you haven't seen it, you're thinking about possibly seeing it, then now's the time to stop listening. But if you've seen it and you just kind of want to hear a kind of brief discussion about it, then please keep listening. So the first season starts out, I thought, fairly strong. It's about superheroes in like a real modern world. I don't know. Do you know where it takes place? Where's the setting? It's kind of like a New York. Is it New York City or something similar? I don't know. some New York.
I haven't really paid attention to that. It's
Right.
at the very least generic something.
Generic something, very contemporary, very New York-esque big city. So we have these superheroes, and they're kind of miscreants. They're, they don't follow the law, they misbehave, they're really not great people. So it has this interesting premise right off the bat. I think it maybe took me a little while before I got drawn into the first season, but I think there were enough interesting elements about the characters, from Huey to Billy Butcher to Annie. There were just some very sort of interesting characters going on, and especially Homelander, that kind of hooked me to the show. There were a lot of elements going on. There was the superhero element, there was the action element, there was the love interest element, all of these things going on in sort of a fast-paced, interesting show. Did you like the show at the beginning, or did it take a little while to catch on for you?
I enjoyed it right off the start. I do have an affinity for superheroes, comic books, superhero shows, and generally speaking, you can tell when a movie or a show is going to be good. I'd say within the first minute, just kind of seeing how they put that together, how they introduce you to something. Something that can be almost as important as the finish is really the intro, is the hook. It's what gets you interested. And if the show is realistic enough and grounded enough, and you can have an emotional connection with the characters, then you can get drawn in. And this is one of those shows that definitely knows how to build a story, how to write dialogue, how to write characters. It has very capable actors doing a great job and really putting themselves into it. So yeah, I found it very easy to get pulled into.
Cool. Something interesting tidbit. I had no idea what The Boys was before I started watching it. I literally went into it completely blind. I didn't even know the genre. I had heard the name The Boys being referenced by friends. Oh, we're going to go watch The Boys. And for some reason, maybe imagery of things that you might see in Peaky Blinders, another show I haven't seen, but that old English sort of setting. For some reason, I thought this was The Boys. It was going to be like a whole bunch of kids in bowler hats, running around asking for some more, like Oliver Twist. But I was very.
I definitely get that. Like, I think you could have named Peaky Blinders The Boys, and it would have been a similar impact.
Exactly. I had no idea. I had no idea this was a superhero show. Like, I was expecting like these dark, like drudgy scenes from like back alleys and turn of the century England.
That's all Peaky Blinders previews.
So for some reason, I thought this was Peaky Blinders. I started watching, and no, it's bright, it's special effects. It was a very different show, but because of that, I think I had like sort of. I didn't have any preconceptions or any notions, literally zero notions at all going into it. And it was a pleasant surprise. So I really liked the first season. I thought it was strong. It was captivating. It was gory, graphic stuff going on. It's definitely a show that has that kind of shock element. But I enjoyed it. Going into season 2, unfortunately, I thought season 2 did not live up to season 1, not even. I really enjoyed watching season 1. Season 2, I felt like I slogged through it and kind of felt like the characters in the show were also doing the same. I know it was filmed during COVID, and I have to think that because of maybe the filming restrictions, the show suffered. Do you have any thoughts on the second season? And then I'll give you some more details about what I thought.
Absolutely. I thought the second season was solid television. The first couple of episodes, certainly the first half of the season, feels kind of slow, as the boys do spend a lot of time indoors. There's also some story issues, and I think much of that can really be attributed to the unfortunate conditions in which the actors had to shoot during the pandemic. Like you mentioned earlier, if you look at behind the set scenes of films and television produced during the height of the pandemic, you'll see that they're basically forcing everyone to wear masks in between scenes and socially distance. And I can only imagine the kind of toll that that takes on any production. And much of what we saw during the past 2 years has been awful in terms of television and film. It's both the quantity and the quality of film and television media has gone down drastically. So The Boys is one of the few shows that set the bar higher in terms of shows in general, and was really something during the past few years to look forward to, because even when it wasn't at the top of its game, it was still far better than the majority of everything else that was playing.
Right. And like you were saying, they were kind of in this underground basement for a lot of the second season. And guess like the rest of us, the boys didn't really get out. I think a lot of the things that I really liked in the first season weren't as fleshed out in the second season, or just kind of got a little stale. So for the second season just didn't really work for me as well. I almost found myself bored at times. And I think I read reviews regarding the second season, and a lot of the fans were sort of saying similar things. Moving right on to the third season that came out not that long ago, I guess this past summer of 2022. I think the third season is a lot better than the second season. There's a lot more going on. They're not stuck in the basement the whole time. They're moving around. They're going to Russia. It's filmed in a number of different, more interesting locations. There's some interesting new aspects to the third season, some new spins on things. But at the same time, I think some of the elements of the first season were still not present in the third season. It feels like the romantic element between Annie and Huey is just kind of strained. It's like, they're building the relationship. Is it going to work? A regular guy trying to go out with a superhero celebrity. It's like a very interesting, it's almost like a movie in itself. What was that movie? Was that called Hitch? The movie with Will Smith where he's like a trainer. He's trying to get the Paul Blart Mall Cop guy. Kevin Smith? Or is Kevin Smith the guy from? I've also seen that one. Is Kevin Smith the guy from Jay and Silent Bob? I get James what's his name? The guy, the big guy.
Yeah,
they're both big.
That's Kevin Smith. You're talking about Kevin James.
Kevin James. I'm sorry. They're both big dudes. Either way, you had that sort of story in the first season of The Boys. Interesting, intriguing. And then they're kind of boyfriend, girlfriend in the third season. And it's just kind of, I don't know, it's a little stale. They're bickering, they're on, they're off. I don't know. It's not that exciting. But
also, I mean, Huey and Starlight are possibly the most vanilla, white, boring characters in the entire show. Possibly.
Right. And, I guess they're not supposed to be, because Annie has superpowers, but Huey is kind of supposed to be that sort of typical nerdy white guy, but, I don't know, with a lot of heart and motivation. I don't know. whatever. But yeah, I agree with that point. So moving on to sort of a little bit of a character analysis. Billy Butcher, played by Carl Urban. I first really got exposed to him in Lord of the Rings. I thought he was phenomenal in Lord of the Rings, just had like this incredible intensity to every single line and scene he was in the movie. And like, I love the guy immediately. I was like, this guy might be the best actor in Lord of the Rings, but he wasn't in it for very long. So it's kind of nice to see him in a full fleshed out role. My critique, or actually, I'm going to ask you what you thought of his performance in The Boys, and then I'll tell you what I thought. What did you think of Carl Urban as Billy Butcher? Pros and cons.
I'll say this: Carl Urban brought me to the show, I would say, because I saw the posters for the show. I also didn't know much about it, and saw his face on it, and I'm like, I like Carl Urban. The kind of character and kind of performance he's giving, I have a love-hate relationship with, much like he has with himself and everyone else who he works with. At least, his character. The character that Carl Urban plays, Billy Butcher's very over the top. He's too over the top most of the time, and his character seems to be very limited in growth and very repetitive in certain mannerisms, which kind of make it feel like less of an authentic character. So I really enjoy the performance. I like what he's doing. I like him as an actor. And at the same time, I've got some issues with the over-the-top elements because it strains credulity at times.
Yep. That pretty much encapsulates my thoughts on his performance as well. I love his performance. I like seeing him on screen. He's intense. He's interesting to watch, but it's like he's always on 10 all the time. And that intensity that I liked in Lord of the Rings is kind of, if you saw hours and hours of that same intensity at 10 the whole time, it might get a little old. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. It's like he only has one speed, and that's overdrive. So I think his performance would be better if, he played it a little more dynamically, not being on 10 all the time, but, moving around a little bit more. But nonetheless, he's a fun character. And he's definitely one of the stalwarts of the show. If he is not the best character, I would say he's the top character in the show. Moving right on to who would be number 2, I would say that's going to be Anthony Starr, who plays Homelander. Homelander, I think, is the most interesting character in the whole show. And he is such a good nemesis, like demented personality that, I don't know, he's almost fun. I enjoy watching him. He's more enjoyable to me than literally anyone on the boys team. What do you think about Anthony Starr as Homelander?
Well, I was listening to the RLM podcast or whatever on this particular show. I think you were calling it the Homelander show, and that's fairly accurate. It's not entirely accurate, but fairly accurate. Anthony Starr gives a great performance. He is definitely the opposite of Billy Butcher, and that all comes to a head in season 3 when we see these characters go head to head, and that's in many ways it's what the whole show's been leading up to. We have on the one hand the boys and Billy Butcher as their leader, and on the other hand we have the Seven and Vought, and we have Homelander as their leader. And these two are they're going head to head, not just physically, but mentally, and also in terms of their egos. They meet a couple of times when Homelander has the opportunity to kill Billy, and he actually saves his life. He seems to enjoy torturing him, but like the Joker, he also seems to see his nemesis as being essential to his own identity and his own survival. He needs to have that person to fight.
Do you think he's a little too neurotic, or do you think he's perfect for the part? That might be more of a broader question for the whole show. But what do you think of his neurosis?
I think for television, things are always amped up because life is actually kind of gray areas and subtleties, and that's not always easy to communicate. So it's probably overblown. And even when it comes to the deficiencies, let's say, in how Billy Butcher's character is written, I would say it all comes down to the writing, really, not the performances, and not even necessarily the story itself, but just how these characters are written. It's like, how can we make these people talk like real people? Of course, it was adapted from a comic book, which I haven't read but plan to, and maybe that'll give us an idea. It's very possible and very likely that all these characters had much, much less dialogue on the pages of a comic book. So a character like Billy Butcher, who's probably very silent and sullen and then suddenly screaming, it probably doesn't say much in the comic book. So they had to make up a lot in between the lines in order to, make this a show that can go on season after season. And I'm not saying that they necessarily, or that they embellish necessarily, just that's the work that's required whenever we're adapting something from one medium to another, especially from book to film.
Right. So moving right along, Chase Crawford plays the Deep in the show. He's kind of almost a comic relief character. He's probably one of my favorite characters in the show. He doesn't get a lot of screen time in any of the 3 seasons, but they definitely bring him out in season 3 a number of times as he gains entry back into the 7 squad. Yeah, he has this affinity for fish, for aquatic animals, and he keeps getting into these funny situations, these comic situations where, he's trying to help and he winds up hurting his fishy friends. Let's see. Some of the other characters on the 7, I'm looking at the page, at the cast page on IMDb right now, but it has like their names in the show, but not like their superhero names. There's Homelander's like female counterpart almost. Her name's Cassandra in the show. I don't know what her superhero name is. Maybe something Knight, Queen Maeve. That's it. Queen Maeve. Right,
the Wonder Woman avatar.
Right.
Yeah.
There's Wonder Woman. There's Black Noir. You don't see his face. There's the A-Train.
They're comparing him to Batman.
Yeah, they're all...
It's not really accurate, but that was the closest they could get.
Yeah, Cassandra, Queen Maeve get some screen time, but none of them I find are as interesting as Homelander or the Deep. In the first season, we had Elizabeth Shue as sort of this mother character almost to Homelander, and that was a weird, perverted sort of relationship going on there. It was kind of cool to see her in something, she's a star actress. It's been in some of the biggest movies I saw growing up. We have Stormfront in season 2, who winds up being like an actual Nazi. Her name is Aya Cash. Something that bothered me a lot about her character was that not only does she look Jewish, one of her parents is actually Jewish, and like that's who they cast. They cast like the most Jewish looking woman possible as like the actual Nazi. Like, what were they thinking?
Maybe part of the idea was just to throw you off so they could do the big Nazi reveal. Because you'd assume that even though this wasn't, not all Nazis look like this, but the typical image of a Nazi is blonde hair and blue eyes. So I guess they gave you something that didn't look like that, and then it could be a shock when it was finally revealed.
Yeah, I guess it just didn't work for me so much. I'm like, you literally picked a Jew to be a Nazi, but okay, moving right along. On the boys team, we have Frenchie, played by Tomer Capone, who I believe you told me is Israeli.
Yeah, he's Israeli. He was in Fauda, and his character
Fauda. He gets exploded.
Yup, he gets killed, and that was, I assume that was his end. I don't know this for sure, but I assume that was to make room for him to get into the boys.
That's so funny. He got reincarnated as a Frenchman.
Yes.
Although my guess is there's a lot of immigrants in Israel from France. So my guy.
Oh yes, he's almost certainly a French immigrant.
Right. So that's pretty cool to see. We have Kimiko, played by Karen Fukuhara. I don't believe I've seen her in anything else. Frenchie and Kimiko have this interesting sort of relationship that seems to border on romance, but winds up being more of like a brother-sister type thing. And we have...
It's very sweet, very, very touching. I just saw her, she showed up in Bullet Train.
Cool.
Very briefly. It was a fun cameo.
We have Mother's Milk, played by Laz Alonso. I don't believe I've seen him in anything. What do you think about the boys' team? I don't know. At this point, I think they're a little vanilla in season 3. Any thoughts on the boys' characters?
Yeah, and I hear the question inherent there. Like many first films, the sequel often fails to capture the magic. And part of what we get in a first film, or hopefully in a first season of a TV show, is character building. And we get to experience all these characters meeting each other for the first time. Not necessarily that it's the first time they met each other as the characters that they are, but it's the first time we see them interacting, and everything feels kind of new. By the time we get to the second and the third season, these characters are already a cohesive unit, and part of what made them intriguing is lost because the writing doesn't put as much time into developing their individual components. For example, Frenchie's character in season 1, I just found him more and more interesting all the time. There's that part where he's trying to figure out how to kill translucent, and he takes a bunch of LSD, and then he's watching a turtle, and he has this epiphany about how he can do this thing. So it's like revelations like that about individual characters, and kind of just getting to experience that I found really fun about season 1. And I wish there was more of that in the following seasons. And I think that might be kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe some of what made the characters interesting in the first season maybe has gotten a little stale because they haven't put more work into character development, or maybe they're just not focusing on individual characters as much. I'm not sure.
It seems that some characters are getting, I don't know, because it seems like they're trying to divide all the character building. They're trying to divide it evenly amongst the cast, which makes a lot of sense. These people are getting paid a lot of money. They all have agents which vie for them to get equal pay and amounts of screen time, generally speaking. And I see season 3, jumping back and forth between characters and trying to do that. It just doesn't feel as interesting, maybe because we're doing a lot of repetition, even when it comes to Mother's Milk finally getting or finally approaching getting comeuppance in season 3. It's like he's been talking about this for 3 seasons already. It's the same story. So it just some things like that are not that interesting.
Right. Yep, have to agree with you. It would be interesting if, I assume they're making another season. Season 3 didn't really wrap things up, but it would be interesting to, I don't know, maybe see more interesting things about the individual characters that might make you gravitate more towards their story and the arc of where their character is going. We have to mention Stan Edgar, who's played by Giancarlo Esposito. I was introduced to his character in Breaking Bad. Wow, he was good in Breaking Bad. Almost so good that I have a hard time seeing him in anything else. He is he's the head of VOT. He's the big bad guy who keeps everyone in check and holds the reins. And I guess those reins were taken from him in season 3. So, he doesn't play as big a part in season 3. Maybe the show is gravitating away from him. But once again, he gives a good performance in, the things I've seen him in. Is there anything you would like to see, or let me hold off on this question. The question is there anything you would like to see in the next season? But I want to ask, before that, season 3 deviates a lot from previous seasons because there's a new added element of temp V. Essentially, you could take this new substance, you could inject this new substance that's developed by VOT. It's in the development phase, and it gives whoever takes it temporary superpowers. So it's this new spin, and it's like, yay, now everyone has superpowers and we get to have these big boss fights. So to me, that was very unnecessary. I definitely see why they did it. Like, we want to have bigger superhero battles, but to me, it's kind of counterintuitive with like the motives of the boys. Did you like that element at all, or you felt the same as me?
I both like it and dislike it at the same time, which I think is just kind of cuts to the core of the issue, is that it really is, I guess they had to have it both ways. In other words, what makes the show interesting is the fact that we've got bad superheroes, which is something that we don't see. They seem to be mostly evil, and on the other hand, we've just got human beings, and that's the conceit of the show. We have to watch these underdogs fight these gods, these superhumans. And when you take the regular people and you turn them into superheroes, then it's basically just like, it's having superheroes punch each other, which is that's a really quick way to kill a story, and that seems to be the way that so many superhero films unfortunately go, is just two invincible characters punching each other, which does nothing. It doesn't move the story anywhere. But at the same time, in a show like this, especially with the story they have, where superheroes are created via a special serum, it's inevitable that you're going to, at some point, have other people turning into superheroes and fighting with the other supes. It's kind of an unavoidable trajectory for the show.
Right. Yeah, I definitely thought it was a bit of a cheap trick to get, more bang boom on the screen. Another new element for season 3 was Soldier Boy, played by Jensen Ackles, who I don't know, I'm not familiar with. Did you like Soldier Boy's role in the 3rd season? Do you think he added to it in a positive way? Did you like seeing him on the screen?
Yeah, I haven't seen much of Jensen Ackles either. I know he's been on this show called Supernatural for like a decade or something. This really long-running, successful live-action show. And he was looking for work, and he was speaking to some of the people who work on the show, and they got him a job. I think his performance is great. So, you can, if you look at him, you can probably tell he worked out very hard for the show. And Anthony Starr, when he saw him, he was like, "Hey man, you didn't have to do that. You could have just put on the suit. They'd build in the muscles." Apparently, he felt kind of stupid after that, but he looks terrific. I'm really glad he did do the workout, because he comes off as an intimidating guy, absolutely just unhinged, and very much a sociopath. I think he gives a compelling performance. I'm glad he's in the show. The only thing I kind of want from his character is that he'd be even more intense, but perhaps that's something we'll see later on.
Right. Yeah, I definitely hear that they could have utilized him more, and maybe made him more of the spotlight, as opposed to, he almost seems like a side character. He's like Billy Butcher's luggage to get to Homelander. There is Claudia Dumit, who plays Congressman Victoria. She's an all right actress. I don't know, didn't stand out too much to me in a good way or a bad way. She explodes people's heads, and I guess she's moving into a place maybe that Stan Edgar occupied in previous seasons. I do remember after I watched the 3rd season, I had some sort of plot issues with it. Like, Soldier Boy has this power that his chest explodes from time to time for an unknown reason. Maybe it's stress, maybe it's something else. They did all these experiments on him when he was in the Russian prison, gulag, wherever he was. So these explosions, incredibly dangerous, also seem to remove superheroes' powers if they're in the vicinity, and that's what happened to Komiko. So this happens more than once. I think it happens twice before they even encounter, before the big battle with Homelander at the end. And not once do the boys, or not once did I realize or recognize while watching the show, do they say, let's use this power just to get rid of Homelander's powers. If Homelander doesn't have powers, he's pretty easy to take down. But no, they just go after him the old-fashioned way. And I don't know. The end fight scene was just a little frustrating for me for that reason. Also because what happens is Billy Butcher, with his superpowers, instead of fighting Homelander the whole time, Homelander grabs Billy's kid, well, I guess really Homelander's kid, and he basically, holds him for, well, not for ransom, he holds him as a hostage. So then you have Billy Butcher and Homelander both fighting Soldier Boy. It's like, yay, let's switch up the teams. It's like, come on. The entire show is all leading up to this one moment, and then you have Billy Butcher fighting alongside Homelander instead of trying to take him down. So a little frustrating for me with what seemed to me like some plot holes.
I feel the same way about those things you mentioned specifically. That power of that character, they don't talk about, they don't introduce, they talk around it. And then never speak about it again when it comes to describing what this guy's powers actually are. And I think that was a mistake. I think they probably just got rushed in production. Maybe they thought they had more time. Maybe they were overconfident. But that's just that was a mistake on their part. It's like this is not the kind of thing that's helpful as a surprise to the audience. It's just kind of confusing, like what's happening.
Right.
And that fight at the end it underlies the issue that you're talking about. Is that when you take away the genius and the creativity and ingenuity of these characters and just make them superheroes, then you've got a problem. And maybe that's why they're making the temporary compound V something that kills the people who ingest it. Maybe that's something to do with it, because they realize that they can't keep this, people acquiring superheroes thing going without also giving them some kind of critical flaw or something like that.
Right. And if it's available to the public, if everyone's a superhero, no one's a superhero. So yeah, They seem to pull that chess piece off the board pretty quick after introducing it. Season 2, I don't know, it was almost unmemorable. I don't even remember all that much that went on. There was the big Stormfront arc that happened. But I guess season 3 was definitely more interesting. I also saw it more recently. In season 3, not to shift back and forth so fast, but in season 3, Black Noir, you get to know his character a little more, and I don't know if that's a good thing. So it seems like he's silent because maybe he's a mute, maybe he doesn't have the ability to speak, but it seems like he also has a lot of neurological issues. He's got like cartoon characters in his head, and maybe some sort of religious component going along with it.
It seems he probably has severe brain damage.
Yeah, he got injured in the South America thing.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The taking off his mask thing didn't help the character, and what helps the character even less is that after creating this mystique and his buildup after 3 seasons, they just kill him. So they do him the disservice of unmasking him and unkilling him. So yeah, I don't know what that was about.
Right, like in Hook, they took away his dignity.
Yeah.
Smee, my dignity. So I would fault that as well. Black Noir he didn't have much of a story, but he was a solid, intimidating character, and they basically defanged him in multiple ways in season 3, and then they killed him. So that was kind of sad. They definitely could have kept him in the show as this sort of enigma, or at least built on the enigma a little bit more instead of peeling it back. Any other thoughts on season 3 or the show in general before we wrap it up?
Thoughts on season 3 and the show in general. I agree with you. I like season 3 more than season 2. I think they made a concerted effort to get bigger and to do better. They're invested in this show. They want it to work. Everyone who's working on it, I think they're trying really hard. And even if it's not perfect, which it certainly hasn't been so far, I'm looking forward to what they do next. I like it. I like what they're doing. I like what they're trying to do. I'm occasionally disgusted and annoyed at some of the things they do, but overall, I like it.
Right. I was going to ask before, do you have anything you'd like to see in season 4, or anything you're anticipating, or, at this point, it's just kind of random what happens?
I really haven't put much thought into it, but during the course of this discussion, kind of rehashing some of the details, it had me pondering what was going to happen next. And if they're taking down Stan Edgar, and they're taking down Stormfront, and they've also removed Black Noir, it seems like the whole regime is collapsing. And this next season, we're probably going to get a bunch of new characters and whole new stakes. That's what I'm anticipating.
Right.
About the specifics, I really don't think into shows in in that much detail.
Right. I guess it could go two ways. They could either, do that to try to, bring some new life, some new energy, new characters to the show, or they could just keep it going, trying to bring down Homelander and the same way they've been doing in the previous 3 seasons, could be like Stranger Things, where the bad guy just keeps going and going when we spent so much time trying to destroy him. But no, he's not dead. Oh no, we have to have a whole nother season of adventure trying to take down the same guy. So, my guess is we're going to have more of the same in season 4, but who knows, shows could always surprise you, like Stranger Things season 4, which I thought was better than season 3, but that's a whole nother podcast. So either way, it seems like we both liked The Boys. I think it's a show that has its ups and downs. Just to throw out quick rating, I think I would maybe rate The Boys. People on IMDb seem to rate TV shows much higher than movies for some reason. You see TV shows with 8s and 9s. I don't understand that. I'm going to rate it as if it was a movie. I would rate The Boys season 1 as a 7 out of 10. I would rate season 2 as a 5.5 or 6, and I'd rate season 3 as a 6.5. If you had to rate them, would your rating system go similar?
Yeah, I'd say it would be very, very close, probably within a half a point for each season.
Right. So I guess we'll wrap things up here. I would just say, if you haven't seen The Boys, it is violent and shocking and gory and graphic, and it's all these things thrown in that you'd expect from an HBO show. It's kind of got that gore that you'd see in what's his name, Django Unchained, Pulp Fiction. Who's the director?
What's Tarantino. Very explosive.
Quentin Tarantino. It's like this explosive, like watermelons exploding sort of graphic violence. So yeah, it's a very intense show in that way, and we have some very intense characters, but it's also got the fantasy superhero element to it. So we both enjoyed it. You might enjoy it too, or it might be a little too much for you. Either way, thanks for tuning in, and thank you, Gabriel L, for joining us this evening.
It's been good. It's been real. Thank you.
See ya.